Do you know the story of a young genius who could have ruled the courts of Naples but chose instead to follow a silent voice from a crucifix? A man who traded fame and fortune for a life among the forgotten, becoming a shepherd to sinners and a thorn to the proud? A bishop who wrote over 100 works not for scholars, but for wounded souls, and whose quiet fire still burns in the heart of the Church today. This is the story of Saint Alphonsus Liguori, the founder of the Congregation of the Most Holy Redeemer. Before beginning, drop an Amen in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more stories of the saints. Don't forget to share it so others may discover this story and be inspired to live holier lives. Chapter 1. A Brilliant Mind in Naples. In the vibrant city of Naples, 1696, Alphonsus Maria de Liguori was born into a noble Catholic family. His upbringing was one of privilege, but also of prayer. His parents, devoted to their faith, ensured he received the finest education. Early on, Alphonsus showed signs of something exceptional, a quiet child, reflective beyond his years, with a deep love for learning and spiritual things. As others played, Alphonsus was often found in silent corners, eyes fixed on a book or lost in thought. God was already working mysteriously within him. Even in his early studies, Alphonsus displayed brilliance across disciplines. He grasped theology and philosophy with ease, but also excelled in law, mathematics, music, and painting. His talents amazed his tutors. He could write with elegance, argue with precision, and translate complex truths into beauty. He wasn't only a student, he was a young master of many gifts. His father, seeing the promise of greatness, guided him toward law, a field that would offer wealth, recognition, and social standing. At just 16, Alphonsus earned doctorates in both civil and canon law, a remarkable feat. He quickly rose in prominence, becoming one of Naples' youngest and most skilled lawyers. His courtroom victories earned him fame and admiration. Nobles sought his counsel, judges respected his intellect. Yet in the midst of this rising star, Alphonsus remained humble, never letting glory consume him. Beneath his robe of success burned a restlessness, a holy ache for something greater than human praise. Amid his growing reputation, Alphonsus chose a different rhythm of life. He prayed daily, visited the poor, and avoided the distractions of high society. In a world of vanity, he clung to chastity and virtue. He often spent hours in silent adoration before the Blessed Sacrament. While others celebrated wealth and ambition, Alphonsus turned his gaze heavenward. His soul longed not for applause, but for communion with God. Success did not satisfy him, it stirred deeper questions. In moments of rest, Alphonsus turned to the arts, not for fame but for devotion. A gifted painter, he created religious images for prayer, not for display. Each canvas reflected his love for the sacred. His music, too, flowed from a heart rooted in faith. He composed hymns that echoed through homes and churches, including the cherished Tu scendi dalle stelle, still sung in Italy today. Through brush and melody, Alphonsus gave glory to the one who inspired it all. These expressions weren't hobbies, they were acts of worship. Alphonsus believed that intellect should serve love, and love should lead to God. He used every gift, logic, beauty, discipline, as a path to holiness. His mind served his soul. With every accomplishment, he built not a name for himself, but a deeper sanctuary within. His success was real, yet it was only the outer shell of a heart already beginning to listen for God's voice. To many, Alphonsus was destined for greatness in courts and councils. A life of honors seemed inevitable, but heaven had another plan. Beneath the prestige lay a soul waiting to be called. Alphonsus's life would not be defined by legal brilliance, but by surrender. In time, he would trade titles for simplicity, reputation for mission, and the admiration of men for the love of Christ, and that choice would change the Church forever. Chapter 2. A crushing defeat and the call from heaven. In 1723, Alphonsus Liguori, a brilliant young lawyer in Naples, faced a devastating defeat. Assigned a major case, he argued with confidence, only to lose due to hidden corruption and betrayal. The injustice shocked him. "The world has betrayed me," he murmured. It wasn't just the case he lost, it was his faith in worldly systems. That painful moment shattered his ambition and pride, but quietly, it opened a door. What seemed like failure would soon become the beginning of a divine calling. Shattered and humiliated, Alphonsus withdrew from public life. He no longer entered courtrooms or engaged in legal debates. Instead, he wandered in silence, wrestling with sorrow and confusion. His failure had not only wounded his pride, it had stripped him of direction. Yet in the quiet of that pain, Alphonsus turned inward. He began to pray like never before. What had once been routine devotion now became a lifeline. In the solitude of his room and the stillness of churches, he poured out his soul to God. One day, while kneeling before a crucifix in the Church of the Redeemer, Alphonsus felt something shift. Gazing at Christ on the cross, wounded, silent, loving, he heard within his soul a voice, "Leave the world and give yourself to me." The words were not thunderous, but they struck him like lightning. In that sacred moment, all his ambition, his talents, his plans, they faded. He rose from his knees not as a lawyer, but as a man called by God. The courtroom would no longer be his battlefield. His life now belonged to a higher judge. News of his decision stunned Naples. A brilliant young lawyer giving up everything to become a priest? His father was furious. Friends were confused. "You are wasting your gifts," they insisted. But Alphonsus stood firm. With gentle courage, he let go of fame, fortune, and comfort. He knew that worldly success had left him empty, but God's voice had filled him with peace. For the first time, he walked a path not chosen by human plans, but by divine love. Alphonsus began studying theology with quiet determination. He dressed simply, lived modestly, and embraced voluntary penance. Though once surrounded by honors, he now slept on straw, fasted regularly, and sought humility in all things. He read scripture not to master it, but to be mastered by it. Each day became a lesson in surrender. His joy grew not from applause, but from obedience. He had found the treasure hidden in the field, and he was ready to sell all to possess it. To deepen his resolve, Alphonsus wrote his own spiritual rule, a personal covenant with God and Mary. In it, he pledged to live for souls, to love the cross, and to reject anything that did not lead to holiness. He placed himself under the protection of the Blessed Mother, whom he would honor for the rest of his life. This rule became his compass. With each line, he left behind the old Alphonsus and embraced the new. The road to sainthood rarely begins with applause. For Alphonsus, it began in the ashes of defeat. But God often chooses brokenness to build something unshakable. That courtroom loss became his greatest gain. From humiliation rose holiness, from sorrow came surrender, and from surrender came a mission that would change the Church forever. Chapter 3. Priest of the Poor and the Forgotten. In 1726, at the age of 30, Alphonsus Liguori was ordained a priest. The ceremony was simple, but his heart burned with purpose. He could have chosen to serve in the grand parishes of Naples, where comfort and status awaited. Instead, he turned his eyes to the hills, to the remote, impoverished villages of southern Italy. These were places others had forgotten, where priests rarely visited and people lived in spiritual neglect. Alphonsus made them his mission. He did not go to be admired, he went to serve. His style of preaching was unlike anything the villagers had known. He didn't speak with lofty language or theological jargon. He spoke with warmth, simplicity, and love. He told stories, used images they understood, and explained the faith in words that touched the heart. People listened, not just with their ears, but with their lives. His homilies didn't impress, they converted. Alphonsus showed them that God was not far away or angry, but near, merciful, and deeply concerned with their daily struggles. More than a preacher, Alphonsus became known as a compassionate confessor. He spent hours in dusty chapels or under trees, listening to the sins and sorrows of the poor. He never rushed a penitent. He never scolded or shamed. Instead, he offered mercy, hope, and healing. His confessional became a place where broken hearts met the tenderness of God. For many who had long felt unworthy, Alphonsus was the first to help them believe in forgiveness again. He was called not just a priest but a father. Beyond the sacraments, Alphonsus built spiritual life in places where faith had nearly vanished. He organized public prayers, community rosaries, and catechism classes under open skies. He taught the children through songs and stories and helped adults rediscover the beauty of the Mass. He arranged group confessions and holy communions so even the most timid would come. Often, he traveled by foot through rough terrain, carrying only his crucifix, rosary, and a few worn prayer books. His presence brought joy. His visits revived faith. He never arrived with grandeur. Alphonsus wore a plain cassock, ate whatever the poor shared with him, and slept wherever they offered. His hands were blistered, his feet calloused, but he never complained. He lived the gospel he preached. People were drawn to his holiness not just in words, but in witness. His humble way of life spoke louder than sermons. By example, he taught them that sanctity was possible even in the fields, even in poverty, even in silence. Where others saw failure and abandonment, Alphonsus saw fields ready for harvest. He believed every soul mattered, especially those no one else remembered. In villages forgotten by bishops and nobles alike, he became a shepherd. He taught them not just to know the catechism, but to live it with love, sacrifice, and faith. The church may have passed them by, but Alphonsus did not. And in doing so, he revealed the very heart of Christ. In these forgotten places, Alphonsus planted seeds of faith that would last for generations. He didn't build cathedrals, but he built trust, hope, and conversion. His priesthood wasn't marked by applause, but by presence. He was there when no one else came. He spoke when others stayed silent, and he loved where the world had forgotten. In the eyes of the poor, Alphonsus was not only their priest, he was a sign that God had not abandoned them. Chapter 4. Founding the Congregation of the Most Holy Redeemer. As Alphonsus continued to serve the poor in remote villages, he began to see a deeper need. The people of the countryside, especially those in the mountains, were being forgotten not only by society but by the church. There were few priests willing to travel to such harsh places. Souls were hungry for God, but had no one to feed them. Alphonsus was moved with compassion. He realized that if the church would not go to these people, then he must gather others who would. A mission was forming in his heart. In 1732, in the small town of Scala, Alphonsus officially founded the Congregation of the Most Holy Redeemer, later known as the Redemptorists. It began with just a handful of men who shared his vision to bring the gospel to the poor and abandoned. They were not powerful or wealthy. They had no fine buildings or influence, but they had faith and they had fire in their hearts. Together, they promised to go where no one else would, to be a light in the darkest corners of the church's vineyard. The spiritual heart of the congregation was clear from the beginning. They would live simply, trusting in divine providence. They would center their lives on the Eucharist and draw strength from deep devotion to the Blessed Mother. Their preaching would be passionate, practical, and rooted in mercy. They were not scholars first, but missionaries, priests of the people. Alphonsus often reminded them, "You are not going to the rich. You are going to those who have nothing, but they have a soul that God longs to save." The early years were filled with trials. The community was poor and often misunderstood. Some church leaders questioned their methods or doubted their purpose. At times, even the people they served responded with hesitation or suspicion. Alphonsus himself faced illness, exhaustion, and discouragement, but he never gave up. He believed that if the work was truly God's, it would survive. And so he prayed, he sacrificed, and he pressed forward, carrying the weight of this new mission on his tired shoulders. With great care, Alphonsus began writing the rule of life for the new congregation. It was more than regulations, it was a vision of missionary priesthood, rooted in humility, sacrifice, and joy. He trained his brothers not only to preach, but to love the people they served. He taught them to be present, to listen, to forgive, and to walk alongside the poor. Every day, he called them back to prayer, to the feet of Jesus in the Eucharist, where true strength is found. What sustained Alphonsus most was his unwavering trust in God's providence. Even when money ran out, or brothers left the mission, or sickness spread through the house, he turned to prayer. He placed everything in God's hands. His nights were filled with silent adoration, and his days were lived in service. He believed that if the work was done with purity of heart, heaven would bless it in time, and slowly, grace began to show its fruit. The Redemptorist community grew first in numbers, then in impact. More men came, more villages welcomed them. Their preaching revived souls. Their example inspired others. And at the center stood Alphonsus, not as a celebrity, but as a father. His humility, courage, and zeal shaped the very soul of the congregation. From the forgotten hills of southern Italy, a great missionary family was born, one that would carry Christ's love to the edges of the world. Chapter 5. Theologian of the People and Guide of Conscience. While Alphonsus Liguori is known for his missionary zeal and pastoral care, he was also a deeply gifted writer and theologian. Over his lifetime, he authored more than 100 works on theology, moral guidance, prayer, and devotion. What made his writing special was its purpose. It was never meant just for scholars, but for everyday people. He wanted to bring the light of Christ into ordinary hearts. Every page he wrote was filled with clarity, warmth, and a deep love for souls seeking salvation. Among his many writings, his most influential was Theologia Moralis, or moral theology. It became a cornerstone of Catholic teaching. At a time when moral thought often swung between severe rigor and careless leniency, Alphonsus offered a balanced path. He taught that moral truth must be upheld, but always with compassion. His theology respected both the holiness of God and the weakness of humanity. His approach invited people to conversion not through fear, but through trust in mercy and grace. Alphonsus rejected the harsh methods that frightened sinners away from the confessional. He also warned against those who made light of sin. Instead, he proposed a merciful middle way that honored church tradition while applying it with gentleness. His model, known as equiprobabilism, gave confessors a pastoral method that respected conscience. He encouraged priests to be mirrors of divine mercy, not judges. His theology was not abstract, it was lived out in the real struggles of real people. Alongside theology, Alphonsus wrote devotional books that became spiritual companions for millions. Works like Visits to the Blessed Sacrament and the Glories of Mary were treasured across homes, parishes, and seminaries. They were not complicated. They were written with tenderness and simplicity. He invited the faithful to draw near to Jesus in the Eucharist and to trust in the loving care of the Blessed Virgin. His devotions brought peace to the anxious, hope to the burdened, and joy to the humble. What set Alphonsus apart was his way of writing. He spoke not as a scholar trying to impress, but as a shepherd reaching his flock. His words were easy to understand, yet full of depth. He believed that theology should not be locked in classrooms, it should be preached on roads, whispered in confessionals, and prayed at kitchen tables. His love for the poor shaped his language. His goal was not admiration, it was conversion. For over 200 years, Alphonsus's writings have been used to form seminarians and guide confessors. His work continues to be quoted by popes and studied in seminaries. His clear, compassionate voice still speaks to hearts. His influence reshaped Catholic moral teaching, making it more human, more pastoral, and more rooted in Christ. He taught not only what is right, but how to walk with the sinner toward holiness. His ability to guide hearts made Alphonsus a true teacher of conscience. He didn't just explain doctrines, he helped people live them. His writings opened the way for ordinary Catholics to understand their faith with clarity and hope. Through simple language and profound love, he taught that holiness is not far or unreachable. It is found in daily fidelity, in mercy given and received, and in walking patiently with God, one step, one soul at a time. Chapter 6. Priest of the Eucharist and of Mercy. For Alphonsus Liguori, the Eucharist was not just part of the faith, it was its beating heart. He built his spiritual life around the presence of Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. In every village he visited, he sought out the tabernacle like one returning home. He believed that in the quiet presence of Jesus, hearts could be transformed. His personal holiness flowed from this source. The altar was not only where he offered Mass, it was where he surrendered his soul, day after day, in adoration and trust. He would spend long hours in silent prayer before the tabernacle, even after a full day of preaching or hearing confessions. There, in the stillness, he drew strength. He experienced what he called the sweetness of the Lord and wanted others to share in it. His book, Visits to the Blessed Sacrament, was written not for scholars, but for the weary and wounded. It helped ordinary Catholics approach Jesus not with fear, but with hope, trusting that he waits for every soul with open arms. Alphonsus believed that Holy Communion was the greatest gift God could give to the soul. He encouraged frequent reception not because people were perfect, but because they were in need. This teaching was bold for its time, when many avoided communion out of scrupulous fear. Alphonsus reminded the faithful that Jesus came for the sick, not the healthy, for the weak, not the righteous. The Eucharist, he insisted, is nourishment for the journey, not a reward for the finish line. Deeply connected to the Eucharist was his devotion to the sacrament of confession. Alphonsus believed true healing began when a soul was reconciled with God. But he knew many stayed away out of shame or fear. He taught that the priest must be the face of Christ, firm in truth, but rich in mercy. In his writings, he gave guidance not just for penitents, but for confessors, urging them to reflect Christ's compassion. The confessional, he said, should be a place of peace, not dread. His love for Mary was not sentimental, it was theological and deeply personal. He called her Mother of Hope and believed she guided sinners gently back to grace. In his book, The Glories of Mary, Alphonsus presented her not as distant, but as near to every sorrow. He taught that through her intercession, even the most hardened hearts could soften. Devotion to Mary, for Alphonsus, was never optional, it was a sure path to Christ. Through these devotions, Alphonsus inspired a generation to rediscover prayer. But he didn't teach prayer as an obligation, he offered it as relationship. He believed that a single, heartfelt prayer could reach heaven more surely than eloquent speeches. For him, prayer was the place where mercy met misery, where sinners found hope. He urged everyone, especially the forgotten, to speak to God simply, honestly, and often. Alphonsus showed that even in weakness, one could be holy, not by escaping life, but by filling it with God through the Eucharist, through confession, through prayer. His spiritual legacy is not a list of rules, but a living invitation. Come to the altar, trust in mercy, and walk with Mary. In this simple path, countless souls have found strength and the courage to begin again. Chapter 7. Reluctant Bishop, Burning with Zeal. In 1762, Alphonsus Liguori received news he never expected and never wanted. Pope Clement XIII had appointed him bishop of the Diocese of Sant'Agata dei Goti. Alphonsus, now in his mid-60s and already in poor health, was heartbroken at the thought. He wept and pleaded to be excused, feeling too old, too sick, and too unworthy. But in the end, he surrendered in obedience. He saw this not as a promotion, but as another cross, a new way to love Christ and serve his church. His appointment was not ceremonial. The diocese had fallen into spiritual neglect. Many priests were poorly formed, and the faithful lacked instruction. Alphonsus, with his gentle firmness, began a quiet reform. He held synods to educate clergy, insisted on personal holiness, and emphasized clear teaching of the faith. He published pastoral letters that combined clarity with compassion. His goal was not control, but conversion, not to dominate, but to awaken hearts. Slowly, the diocese began to breathe again. He chose to live with great simplicity. Though he held the title of bishop, Alphonsus refused luxury. He gave much of his personal income to the poor and kept little for himself. His home was modest. He ate sparingly, dressed plainly, and continued the habits of prayer and penance that had shaped his life as a missionary. His authority did not come from outward appearance, but from a life that matched his words. He governed with integrity and walked among his people as a humble servant. He became known for his tireless care of the sick, the poor, and the imprisoned. Alphonsus made frequent visits to hospitals, homes, and even prisons, often traveling by mule in difficult weather. He spoke gently to the dying blessed babies in crowded homes and brought comfort to those forgotten by society. He did not wait for the needy to come to him, he went to them. His presence was not grand, but it was full of warmth and peace. To many, he was the face of God's tenderness. The people of Sant'Agata came to love him deeply. He was not a distant bishop, but one who knew their names, their families, and their pain. They called him the Bishop of the Little Ones. Children greeted him in the streets. Widows cried when he prayed with them. Farmers brought him bread from their fields. He had no political power, but he carried authority that could only come from holiness, a voice that spoke with truth, and hands that blessed with love. By 1775, Alphonsus's health had declined greatly. His body was bent with arthritis, and his eyesight was failing. Realizing he could no longer lead the diocese as it deserved, he humbly requested to resign. The Pope accepted. Alphonsus returned to his religious community, where he would live out his remaining years in quiet prayer. He had not sought the office of bishop, but he had fulfilled it with a shepherd's heart. In every role he held, Alphonsus remained, at heart, a servant. He did not lead with authority alone, but with compassion, humility, and example. As bishop, he taught more through his presence than through commands, serving at the altar, in the confessional, and among the sick. When he stepped down, it was not a retreat, but a return to silence, to prayer, to the hidden life where he had always found his strength in God. Chapter 8. Final Trials and Faithfulness to the End. In his final years, Alphonsus Liguori entered a period of intense suffering. Age and illness slowly overcame his body. His spine curved until he was nearly bent double, and he was in constant pain. His eyesight faded until he could barely see, and his hands trembled with weakness. At times, he could hardly speak. Once an energetic preacher and missionary, he now spent most of his days confined to a chair. Yet in this suffering, Alphonsus did not grow bitter. He surrendered it to God, offering his pain as silent prayer. Amid his physical decline, Alphonsus faced a deeper sorrow. A complex administrative error led to his removal from leadership in the very congregation he had founded and nurtured with sacrifice. Rome misunderstood his intentions, and painful decisions were made without him. Though his heart ached, he offered no protest. He accepted the judgment with humility. To be cut off from the mission he had poured his life into was a hidden suffering, perhaps the most painful cross he had ever borne. Alphonsus bore these trials with the spirit of the cross. He felt forgotten, misunderstood, even dismissed, but he did not complain. He united himself to Christ, who was also rejected in silence. He found meaning, not in what he could accomplish, but in what he could offer. The loneliness became a chapel. The silence became prayer. He embraced the cross, not as defeat, but as a gift. In that abandonment, he found deeper union with the suffering Christ he had loved since youth. Even with his body broken and his title gone, Alphonsus remained faithful. He continued to pray for the church, for his congregation, and for souls. Though nearly blind, he dictated letters and spiritual reflections from memory. His words carried the wisdom of suffering and the clarity of one who had walked long with God. Visitors often found him deep in prayer, his face peaceful despite the pain. His room became a quiet sanctuary where heaven seemed near. Those last years became a living homily spoken not with words, but with fidelity. Alphonsus, who had once preached to thousands, now preached through patience. His life became a witness to trust, perseverance, and surrender. He showed that faithfulness is not measured by activity, but by love. Though the world could no longer see his work, heaven saw his offering. In silence and obscurity, Alphonsus was still giving everything to God. On the 1st of August, 1787, Alphonsus passed from this life at the age of 91. His death was gentle, surrounded by the brothers of his congregation. He had no riches to leave behind, only a legacy of mercy, prayer, and unwavering faith. Word of his passing spread quickly, and people throughout Naples mourned. They did not remember him for power, but for goodness, for being a father to the poor and a friend to sinners. Though his body was weak and his influence hidden, Alphonsus's final years spoke louder than ever. In pain, he remained peaceful. In isolation, he remained loving. In every moment, he remained faithful. His life had always pointed to Christ, but in these final trials, he became more like him than ever before. His death was not an end, but a final act of trust, a return to the God he had loved, served, and followed to the very end. Chapter 9. Canonized Saint and Doctor of the Church. After a long life poured out in service, Alphonsus Liguori passed into eternal life in 1787. His death was quiet, but the memory of his holiness lived on in the hearts of countless people. For years, stories of his compassion, his writings, and his witness to God's mercy continued to spread. The Church, moved by the testimony of the faithful and the fruits of his life, began the formal process of recognizing his sanctity. In 1816, Alphonsus was declared blessed by Pope Pius VII. Just over 2 decades later, in 1839, Pope Gregory XVI canonized him a saint. The humble missionary, preacher, and bishop was now raised before the world as a model of virtue. His feast day was set for August 1st, the anniversary of his death. The Church did not canonize him simply for what he did, but for who he was, a soul consumed with love for Christ and for the most forgotten. His sanctity was rooted not in miracles or titles, but in a life wholly given to God. In 1871, Pope Pius IX proclaimed Alphonsus a Doctor of the Church, an honor reserved for those whose teachings are of lasting importance to Catholic faith and practice. He was the first doctor of the Church to have begun his life as a layman and lawyer before becoming a priest. This distinction highlighted not only his holiness, but the great depth and balance of his theological insights. His writings, especially in moral theology, offered a merciful and faithful path for souls seeking God. The Church gave him the unique title, Doctor of Mercy and of Conscience. These words captured the heart of Alphonsus's mission. He had shown the Church that doctrine and compassion are not opposites. In his guidance for confessors and pastors, he urged them to imitate Christ not only in truth, but in tenderness. He believed that every person must be led with care, that mercy should never be separated from moral clarity. His voice became a bridge between justice and love. One of his most quoted sayings, "Those who pray will be saved," remains a simple summary of his vision. For Alphonsus, prayer was not optional, it was essential. It was the path to salvation, the doorway to mercy, and the light for those in darkness. That single phrase, passed from generation to generation, became a lifeline for countless souls. In it, he gave the world a message of hope that transcends time and circumstance. His canonization and the declaration as Doctor of the Church confirmed what many already believed, that Alphonsus was a man of God, chosen not only to serve in his own time, but to teach for ages to come. His life blended humility with wisdom, discipline with love. Through his example, the Church recognized a path that was both holy and deeply human, a path others could follow. Alphonsus Liguori died as a humble servant of God, but was raised up by the Church as a saint and teacher for all time. In him, the world saw a man who united prayer and wisdom, compassion and truth. Canonized as a saint and honored as a doctor of the Church, he remains a shining light, one who taught with clarity, lived with mercy, and led countless souls closer to the heart of Christ. Chapter 10. A Legacy of Theology and Pastoral Mercy. The legacy of Saint Alphonsus Liguori is not limited to his missionary journeys or acts of compassion. It extends deeply into the heart of Catholic theology and pastoral practice. Across his lifetime, he authored over 100 works that spoke to the minds of scholars and the hearts of ordinary believers alike. His writings have endured not as relics of the past, but as living texts that continue to guide the Church in both thought and ministry. Alphonsus's theological vision was rooted in balanced truth without harshness, mercy without compromise. He believed that moral teaching must be faithful to the gospel, but always attentive to the real struggles of human weakness. His insights grew not just from study, but from years spent hearing confessions, visiting the poor, and walking with the forgotten. This pastoral experience gave his theology warmth. He taught not from a distance, but from within the lives of those he served. Alphonsus's balanced approach helped shape a more compassionate and hopeful vision of moral theology. His method, later embraced by theologians and pastors, became a trusted guide for forming conscience with both clarity and mercy. He did not impose rules, he walked with souls. He did not condemn, he welcomed and healed. His theology flowed from real life, rooted in pastoral love. In his hands, Catholic moral teaching became not a burden, but a path to encounter the mercy of Christ. Through the 19th and 20th centuries, his writings were widely adopted in seminaries and houses of formation. Future priests studied his reflections not only for their theological depth, but for their pastoral wisdom. His influence shaped the way generations of confessors approached the sacrament of reconciliation. Bishops recommended his texts. Popes cited his thought. In classrooms and confessionals alike, Alphonsus became a quiet companion, teaching the Church how to teach with love. Beyond the seminary, his legacy reached into religious life and spiritual movements. Many communities drew inspiration from his deep trust in God's mercy and his unwavering commitment to the poor. His spirit influenced the founding charisms of new congregations and rekindled a pastoral zeal rooted in gentleness. He showed that orthodoxy and compassion are not opposites, but necessary companions in the work of salvation. Even in his more devotional works, Alphonsus left behind more than comfort, he left formation. His simple, heartfelt style became a model for catechists, preachers, and spiritual writers. He taught that the truths of faith must be accessible, not abstract. His ability to bring clarity without compromise helped generations understand that theology is not only for the scholar, it is for the soul seeking God. Above all, Alphonsus taught the Church to place the struggling soul, not the perfect one, at the heart of its mission. His writings reflect a church unafraid of human weakness, ready to embrace it with tenderness. He saw theology not as theory, but as a lifeline for the lost. His work was more than doctrine, it was an invitation. No matter how far one had fallen, his message was clear. God's mercy reaches further still, and the Church must carry it faithfully. Chapter 11. The Redemptorist mission spreads across the world. After the death of Saint Alphonsus Liguori in 1787, the Congregation of the Most Holy Redeemer, known as the Redemptorists, did not fade. Instead, it began to grow with surprising vitality. The little community he founded in the quiet hills of Scala started sending missionaries beyond Italy into the heart of Europe. From there, they reached into South America, North America, and later across Asia. His vision of bringing the gospel to the poor and abandoned began taking root in places Alphonsus himself had never seen. By the early 20th century, the Redemptorists had expanded into more than 70 countries. They served in cities and mountain villages, in desert missions and crowded slums. They reached war zones and remote islands, often going where others would not. In 1925, they arrived in Vietnam and later brought their mission to other parts of Southeast Asia. In every land, they spoke the same message: God's mercy is for all. Their preaching echoed the tender, practical, and passionate voice of their founder. These missionaries carried on Alphonsus's special care for those forgotten or neglected. They opened mission churches, preached parish missions, ran youth programs, and trained lay leaders. They reached out to the sick, the poor, and those far from the sacraments. Their presence was not flashy, but faithful. Like Alphonsus, they preached with both words and witness. They didn't wait for people to come to them. They went to the people, especially the ones no one else reached. Many Redemptorists would go on to give their lives for the gospel. In places of persecution or war, some were imprisoned, tortured, or killed. Their blood became the seed of new faith, their witness a continuation of Alphonsus's sacrificial love. These martyrs carried the spirit of the founder into the most difficult places, bearing the cross with courage and joy. Their names are not always known, but their example shines. They proved that the Redemptorist mission is not just to preach, but to give everything. Meanwhile, the theological tradition of Alphonsus remained strong. His balanced and merciful approach to moral theology continued to guide seminaries and spiritual directors. Redemptorists were often asked to teach in houses of formation, offering not just theory, but the pastoral wisdom of their founder. The vision of Alphonsus, truth in love, justice with mercy, became a model for how the Church could form consciences with both clarity and compassion. His influence also reached beyond the order itself. Many lay movements, priests, and religious communities took inspiration from Alphonsus's writings and example. His trust in divine providence, love for the Eucharist, and care for the wounded soul became guiding lights for many. The Redemptorist charism was no longer limited to a small congregation. It had become a spirit that breathed through the wider Church, inspiring new generations to serve with humility and courage. From the mountain solitude of Scala, Alphonsus had planted a seed. It was small, hidden, and easily overlooked, but it was alive with faith. Today, that seed has become a global field of mission and mercy. In churches, confessionals, seminaries, and remote villages, the voice of Saint Alphonsus still echoes, reminding the world that every soul matters and that God's love reaches even the most forgotten places on earth. Chapter 12. A Prayer to Saint Alphonsus Liguori. O Saint Alphonsus, faithful servant of Christ, you gave your life for God's glory and the salvation of souls. Through your preaching, writings, and sacrifices, you became a light of mercy for the poor and forgotten. Pray that we may follow Jesus with strong faith, true humility, and hearts filled with love. Pray for our conversion, that we may turn away from sin, pride, and selfishness. Teach us to be humble in success, patient in suffering, and courageous in truth. May we seek not the praise of the world, but the will of God, living our faith with compassion, simplicity, and hope. Saint Alphonsus, you loved Jesus deeply in the Holy Eucharist and found strength in his presence. Help us treasure the Blessed Sacrament, remain faithful in prayer, and make room for silence each day, so that we may hear Christ's voice and grow closer to him. We entrust to you all bishops, priests, and religious, especially those who are weary or discouraged. Pray that they may remain faithful, gentle, and holy shepherds. May they preach the gospel with truth and love, serve the poor with tenderness, and bring God's mercy to every soul. Remember those troubled by guilt, shame, fear, or despair. You comforted many through the sacrament of reconciliation and understood the wounds of the human heart. Pray that they may not run from God, but return to him and find forgiveness, healing, peace, and love. When Christ calls us to a deeper vocation, give us courage to say yes. Help us surrender our plans, let go of worldly attachments, and follow wherever he leads. Even when the road is uncertain, teach us to trust that his grace will always be enough. O Saint Alphonsus, Doctor of the Church and Apostle of Mercy, lead us to Jesus. Teach us to love faithfully, serve joyfully, and endure every trial with hope. May we rest always in the merciful heart of God, and one day rejoice with you in heaven. Amen.